We're still a few weeks away until spring ball, but there's still a lot to discuss. But I wanted to go to you, not in the typical way that we do a mailbag. I wanted to kind of get some broader themes, take some more time with some of the questions, especially because we have a little bit more to draw from. Sherrone Moore was on the Adam Bredeman podcast, so there's some things there. But we're going to get to some of your bigger questions in terms of grand scheme right here on this episode of Locked On Wolverines.
You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday. We are back and doing it. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm your man on the ground, Isaiah Hole, publisher of Wolverines Wire through USA Today Sports Media Group. We are finishing up an 8-show week, 9 if you count the roundtable, which I was not a part of this week. Usually I'm not. Tuesday nights are hard night for me to make often. So nonetheless, we are going to get to your questions. This does not have the same format by any stretch. There's no leaders and best. There's no Victor's Valiant. There's no Blue Crew. So I just took the questions that I thought were the most that I could talk about kind of length. So with that, we will start with Edwin Simmons at Simmons_Edwin. Happy Friday, my brother in Christ. Happy Friday to you. Also, my brother in Christ. Coach Moore versus Coach Harbaugh, recruiting and coaching style. That one's hard to really say to some degree because some of it is stuff that we would we wouldn't really necessarily know. I will say this, Sherrone Moore still got some growing to do in terms of a little bit of a killer instinct that Jim Harbaugh just seems to have, right? Like, it didn't take long before Michigan was just decimating teams. I mean, it still took, they were beating teams handily in 2015, but it wasn't really like an inspiring open. It kind of took till late in the season. Rutgers was, I think, the first game where they just absolutely destroyed, dominated in the way that we became accustomed to seeing Michigan do. And Sherrone Moore, kind of the same thing. We've only seen him really just absolutely annihilate one team so far as a head coach. That was Northwestern. But I think when it comes to coaching style, it's hard to say. Jim Harbaugh, a lot more of a fiery type of guy. I think we can admit that, even though he became much more docile as starting in 2017 and kind of forward, a little bit more docile of a presence, because we knew him at the beginning of his tenure and coming from his previous stops as being a tempestuous type of person. But he really toned that down after the 2016 season. And while it did maybe get a little bit more fiery 2021 forward, it was not quite the same as what it was before. But Sherrone's a little bit more of a player's coach in a lot of ways, I would say. Because Sherrone is like Jim Harbaugh. It took, I wouldn't say that there were a lot of guys from 2015 to 2020 that were like, yeah, like I can't wait to meet back up with Jim Harbaugh. I love him, all that kind of stuff. But then you saw that in 2023 with the Free Harbaugh movement and all of that the players really came to love him. Now, Sherrone already kind of is that and has been that. So that is already a big difference. As far as recruiting, Jim Harbaugh, he had the antics early on, climbing trees, sleepovers, all, jumping into pools, all that kind of stuff. But Sherrone is not that flashy by comparison. However, Sherrone is much more aggressive on the recruiting trail. They both have some similarities in that there might be some guys that I won't name any names as far as Sherrone might do some with Harbaugh, where it's kind of like they're kind of flyers to some degree. There's some players like where maybe the behind the scenes staff isn't on the same page per se, but the head coach is like, this is a guy we absolutely got to have. Jim Harbaugh had that with a couple guys. Who was the one fullback that didn't end up making it to Ann Arbor? Chase something from Florida. I can't remember. It was 2017 guy. He didn't end up in Ann Arbor. Kurt Taylor, he did. And that was kind of like the coaching staff, not so much on board. Jim Harbaugh kind of was like, that's my guy. Right. He had a lot of those. Right. And some of them did work out, like Ben Mason. I almost said Bench Mason. That's how that's worked. Some of them did work out, but not all of them necessarily did. So we'll find out about Sherrone. But Sherrone's a lot more savvy because, he's young. He's under 40 years old. He knows how to connect with guys a lot better. He is, as I said, more of a player's coach. So that kind of helps him out. But I think as far as the recruiting style, it's Sherrone is kind of more in the modern era. Jim Harbaugh is kind of in the old school, right? Like he kind of came in and closed, but no recruits were just sitting there just being like, man, I just love Jim Harbaugh. It was more the position coaches and stuff. And that sometimes almost got Jim into trouble, right? Like Donovan Edwards was one of them where Jim was not as actively involved as, say, some of the people near that recruitment wanted him to be. And I think that you're not going to have to worry about that with Sherrone Moore. Great Bambino X at Colossus O'Clout X. I continue to be impressed by Sherrone Moore. I see a young guy with elite leadership qualities, could be a 20 to 30 year mainstay. Could he be a 20 to 30 year mainstay as Michigan's head coach? If so, can you hypothesize on what his career could look like when it's all said and done? I believe he'll be a U of M legend. It's after 1 year, it's way too early to say, right? Like I'm going to be skeptical for about 5 years. Now, that's not saying that I'm doubting him. But for any first-year head coach, I mean, you can kind of look at year one and say that's pretty good. You can look at year two and say that's pretty good. But we went through that with Juwan Howard. Now, I don't think that Sherrone is going to be in a Juwan Howard situation. I think his support staff is a little bit more, it's a little stronger, right? Because it's football and all of that. He did at least mentor and under Jim Harbaugh and see what it takes to win a national championship. And that's something Juwan Howard didn't have. Yes, he saw what it took to win an NBA finals. It's a different thing in college. It's a different thing with a particular institution versus a franchise, all of that kind of stuff. So I do give him a lot more leeway. He does seem like he's diving in headfirst to NIL. The hire of Sean McGee is going to just be bringing him back. And Sean getting to go on his little walkabout to the NFL was just absolutely, you couldn't have scripted things better for Michigan in terms of that. So to have what Sherrone Moore has at his disposal, to have the support, all of that stuff, that is just going to work for him. Could he be a 20 to 30 year mainstay? I mean, I think that that's certainly a possibility. He does not strike me as the type of guy that's going to be like, I went to Oklahoma. If Oklahoma comes calling, I'm going to listen. He does not strike me as that type of guy. And he strikes me as the type of guy that loves Michigan. And there's a lot of coaches that are like that. And some aren't around. Like I know, like, someone like Kirk Campbell had that same mentality of like, I love Michigan. I never want to leave. I think that's what Sherrone is as well. Being the first like really major program that he's gotten to be a part of. Like I don't count Louisville, no offense, Cards fans. I think that that's going to bode really well, especially for him to move up and have this trust in him. Like I don't see him leaving for the NFL. I don't see him leaving for a lateral job. You're not going to like this analogy, but it's kind of like Ryan Day, where I just don't think like another lateral job or even a technical step up going to the NFL. No one's really climbing over themselves to hire Ryan Day either for the NFL, but I just don't think that a guy that gets their first head coaching job is at a big time school like Michigan is going to bolt for something else. So as long as he keeps it consistently good, yeah, I think he could be a 20 to 30 year guy. And obviously, if that is the case, then yeah, he would be a Michigan legend. I think that it's hard to say that it's going to be back to like the full-on glory days because and the full-on glory days weren't necessarily like a bunch of national championships unless you go to like the 40s. I think he can make him a perennial college football playoff team. He could make him a team kind of like Penn State. I know I got some questions about the future of college football. I don't like it. I don't like where college football is heading in terms of these continuing expanding playoffs. I know Sherrone's all for Big Ten auto bids. I just wish it would go back to the 4, maybe 6, but I'm not going to get what I want. A lot of you aren't going to get what you want either. But I think that if it is expanded, that equals a lot more job security. And I think that he could be a guy that you'd see winning like a national championship, maybe every 10 years. And that I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, but at the same time, that's a pretty high watermark for Michigan, right? They haven't been doing that. But I think that he could be a guy that could do that and then get Michigan to the playoff at like 7 or 8 times out of 10, as long as it's expanded. Because he is a smart recruiter, he's a smart coach, and as long as he surrounds himself with good people, keeps the culture intact, I think, and that's an underrated thing. I think that would really bode well for him as well as Michigan. All right, we're going to move on. We got 4 more questions. We're going to do 2 per segment here. So we'll get going with more here in just a moment. But before we do, life moves fast, especially when you have a family. One day you're watching your kids take the first steps, and before you know it, they're off to college. That's why securing their future is super important. Fabric by Gerber Life makes it simple to get term life insurance that fits your family's needs. With Fabric, you can apply for term life insurance online right from your couch, and you can be covered in under 10 minutes. In many cases, no health exam is required. They've got affordable coverage. You can get $1 million for less than $1 a day, so protecting your loved ones doesn't have to break the bank. And Fabric also offers free digital wills and access to investment accounts to help you plan for your children's future. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their families. Apply today in just minutes at meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. That's meetfabric.com/lockedoncollege. Policies issued by Western Southern Life Assurance Company. Not available in certain states. Prices subject to underwriting and health questions. All right, we got more here. We've kind of covered the Sherrone Moore stuff. I think, did we get to more of that? No, we're moving on from the Sherrone Moore. I was trying to segment things, and then I was like, wait, did I just basically do the same thing a bunch of times? I don't think so. Now we're kind of going to a couple different things here. Starting with Steven at S_D_Brown1218. With the depth Michigan has on defense, you have a projected starting defensive line. And in your opinion, could the second string be better than most college football teams? I think that is certainly possible. So I kind of gave it to you yesterday in my defensive overview, but I wanted to kind of get more into the depth question because there is a ton of depth. It's kind of nuts when you think about it, because the third could be the starting line. The third string essentially could be the starting line at places like Minnesota or even a revamped Indiana. That's like what Michigan's working with right now. So if I was to project, I'd say edges are TJ Guy and Derrick Moore, who I don't necessarily know where they would go in the draft. TJ kind of feels like a 6th rounder. Derrick Moore feels like a 2nd or 3rd rounder, but could certainly work his way into the 1st. And then the interior, you got Rayshaun Benny, who I think will end up being a 1st rounder. And I've been slotting in Trey Williams, the Clemson transfer, as the guy next to him. For now, right? That can change at any point in time, and you could literally put like 3 different guys next to him. So you've got that. Then you get into your second string, which I would say at the moment would be, I'm going to go Cam Brandt with one of the edges, Dom Nichols with the other, and then interior, I would say Trey Pierce and Damon Payne. That's already very good, right? Like, I understand the edges are a little bit more unproven, but at the same time, like, that interior is nasty. And that's already in just a really good spot. The third string, interior, I got Ike Iwunnah, who very well will be subbing in with the 2s as well. I'm a little unsure of who that next guy could be, who would slot next to him. They're a little bit thinner after you get past the first 5, really. But then I think maybe a guy like Travis Moten in year 1, because like I've equated him to freshman year Mason Graham. Maybe not quite as good, but certainly like he can be a tweener between Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. I think when all is said and done, we'll look at that recruitment and say, wow, that was prescient. And then on the exterior, again, having a little hard time trying to figure out who it would be. For now, I would say the exterior would be Emerick Kumba. And I'll go with Nate Marshall, though Lou Gardepai could be that guy. And that's already very good. I think that's like, that third string, like if it was like Rutgers, you'd be like, they're working with something, right? And I understand I just put 2 freshmen in there, but I think those freshmen are going to be kind of ahead of the curve. Travis Moten's an early enrollee. Nate Marshall is not, but I think that he's just a freak athlete, and he's going to be able to come in and kind of have that early push. Could be Devin Baxter as well. But nonetheless, I think that is a solid line. And I think that with the fact that you're going to see some rotations, right? They're not just going to go, all right, 1s, now 2s, now 3s, unless you get into a late game situation. It's more going to be like, Rayshaun Benny and Trey Pierce and Travis Moten, Ike Iwunnah and Trey Williams and stuff like that. Like, it's going to be like some kind of mixture of, so I think that's the good thing, right? Like you see Derrick Moore and Nate Marshall. So I think that's a really, really solid line. We'll see how long I talk about the next one. Probably not as long as you'd like, but Joe at I Knows Ball. Why is Mike Valenti still drumming the hammer? Is it just for clicks, fever dreams, or does he have any insight here? No, he has no insight there. That's kind of what I've been trying to say for the longest time. It's fever dream. It's the same reason why you see it from Ohio State people is like they think that here's the thing. They think more is going on and that there's more evidence of things and that there's worse things than of what have actually happened than what has actually happened. So remember, and I think it is to get people to get, tune into the radio, get riled up and all of that stuff, right? But no, like there's a reason why Ward Manuel got extended, right? They didn't just extend him because it was like, well, Michigan football's about to take its licks, but no, the board extended him because they know that there's a lack of severity. The response from Michigan was because they know that they've got to fight, right? They know that they are in the right with this. And that this was everything that I've said it was in the 2023, in November 2023 and forward. But yeah, I wouldn't put much stock into anything that Mike Valenti says about Michigan in any way, shape, or form because he's got a shtick, right? Like his shtick tends to be of the worst thing is happening. If Michigan, and he even sets it up when Michigan's good, like where it's kind of like they should win this game, and if they don't, now I can rip on them, and if otherwise, it's they did what they're supposed to do, right? And I wouldn't take any stock in anything any Sparty or Buckeye says about any of the Connor Stallion stuff because they don't know actually what happened. They can only go off of what was reported in the media, which isn't fully accurate, or it's been taken out of context or whatever. And I mean, that's the same reason why Michigan's NOA response comes out. And if you're a Michigan fan, you should see it as relatively vindicating, yet the Buckeyes ran with it and like, oh, this is the beginning of the end. Right. That's wishful thinking on their end. So yeah, I wouldn't put too much stock into it. All right. We've got 2 more questions we're going to get to. We will do that here in just a moment. But before we do, March basketball is here, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you end up with 1,000 times your cash. It's fast, easy, and keeps every game exciting. This week, I'm looking at Jason Tatum for more than 29 points and Anthony Davis for more than 12 rebounds. I love how I can make my picks in less than 60 seconds and stay engaged all game long. And with their fast payouts, when I win, my money hits my account in as little as 15 minutes, no waiting around. With their Taco Tuesday deals, PrizePicks even offers weekly promos where you can get discounted player projections for even more value. So download the app today. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. All right. Thank you guys for engaging with this format. We already did a mailbag. It was supposed to be from last week. We did it on Monday. I wanted to do something that I could spend a little more time instead of trying to rush through. So I like this. This kind of works. We'll do this again where I just basically do 2 questions per. Wolverine Warrior at Wolverine Champ 1. Other than quarterback, what is the key in 2025 to get us back into the playoff? It starts with, I mean, we've talked positional, but it starts with the offensive line. The offensive line needs to be way better than it was. Now, the schedule helps theoretically, and having a better quarterback situation is going to help that. But it's going to start with the offensive line because Michigan's still going to want to run the football. It's going to need to protect whoever is under center, right? They cannot be running for their lives. And I don't think that they were that often with as not great as the offensive line was last year. But a lot of plays broke down due to like a late miss. And a lot of the times it was Evan Link or Giovanni Olhade, unfortunately. So if those 2 guys can get better, and then that's already kind of starting things off. I think they've got a great running back room. But then the other part is, can the wide receivers actually make plays? It's not, it's going to come down to a lot of quarterback stuff, but the wide receivers need to be just better. And that doesn't just include, going out and making a big catch. It means also having a run after. That was one of the things that you saw in 2021 was yards after catch was phenomenal late in the season. And they need to find that more. And that's not something that we know for sure that they have in their repertoire. On the defensive side of the ball, I'm pretty great with the front 7. I can even add up to 9 there, maybe 8. The nickel and cornerback situation feels a little precarious. Pretty good with Zeke Berry. Don't know who the nickel is going to be. Is Jair Hill going to come in, start, and be consistent? And then the rotational guys back there, because again, Michigan likes to rotate. I feel good about the rest of it, but again, if there's a glaring flaw that a team can exploit, then that can pose some issues. So I'd like to see what Michigan does as far as that, but I think it rests more on the offense. So I would say that the key is more the offensive line. If that can live up to muster, everything's good, right? If you can get back to the point where like it's 3rd and 3 and we know that we can get 4 on the ground, then you're in an excellent position, because that was kind of what it was in 2022 and 23. Like 3rd and short, you knew Michigan was completing it. So it's going to have to really rest on the offensive line to really be a lot better than it was this past year. All right, finishing us off is Clark at Blue for Life 8. What would you like to see from the offense in the spring game to make you feel good about their progression? Here's the thing. As much as I would like to say all the things I just said, it's kind of hard for me to say anything. Because number one, we're certainly not going to see like 1s versus 2s or something like that. It's going to be a kind of a split. So, and I don't think you can glean a ton from the spring game in the way that we would want to make you feel like, okay, you're getting something. Because remember, Peyton O'Leary 2 years led the team in receiving. 2 years ago, Ben Hall ran for like 100-something yards. Last year, Frederick Moore had a big touchdown. Kendrick Bell had a big touchdown. Where were those guys? I forgot about Kendrick Bell. I don't even think I mentioned Kendrick Bell when I was talking about the offense yesterday. And he was like my inflection player going into this last year. So maybe some consistency. Obviously, I want to see some Bryce Underwood go out and make some pretty throws. But it's you can even go back to like the open practice in 2019. I didn't see the whole spring game in 2019. They called us in for interviews kind of mid-game. But like in the open practice the week before, Eric All and Mikey Sainristil were just absolutely phenomenal. And then when the season comes, they kind of were absent, that year. Mikey Sainristil never really became that receiver, but he became absolutely phenomenal at nickel. So it's hard to really glean, because you can see guys that you might not see all year suddenly have like a breakout performance. So in a way, I want to see exactly that. I mean, you want to see, here's what I would say. You want to see like a guy like Justice Haynes come out, look unstoppable right away, and then take him out. You want to see whatever mix of offensive line do well. But it's funny because like we'll write our takeaways and like mention players like Breon Ishmael last year, Fred Moore last year, a bunch of different guys like Alex Orji and Davis Warren looked pretty good in the spring game. It didn't really translate. It's hard to really understand what is actually going to work when you actually get to the season as it actually is. How can I say actually more? Maybe. So what do I want to see? No injuries. I want to see sharpness from like the guys who are supposed to be stars. And I'd like to see guys that we talk about like actually make some plays. Could a Donovan McCulley or an Anthony Simpson make some big plays? Could some of those guys like Kendrick Bell that made big plays last year, can he make more? But that doesn't really mean anything, because even with what all the spring hype that tends to come, or even fall camp hype, it seems like usually there's a player or two that just does not really live up to it once you get to actual games. So what do I want to see? No injuries. Sharpness from the guys that you expect to be sharp. JJ wasn't even that sharp in the 2023 spring game. So sharpness from the guys that you want to be sharp, and some surprises, and don't count on it necessarily meaning anything. That's where I'm at with the spring game. All right, that's going to do it for us this week. Thank you so much for tuning in to this show and all the others throughout the week. We will talk to you again on Monday. Peace.